Okay, starting off at number 10 now, we have Webdriver Torso. In 2013, a YouTube channel was created called Webdriver Torso. All it did was upload videos like this. Reddit users jumped on it. Theories range from the ridiculous, such as aliens, to the intriguing, such as spy communication. Eventually, a number of Reddit users came up with the answer to this whole mystery, including a blogger who made the most detailed description of it. It turns out that YouTube itself had set up the channel to test the quality of their videos. The actual content of the video is meaningless, hence the random sounds and visuals, but by comparing that video with the original file, YouTube can see how good their uploading system is for video quality. Google later confirmed that this was the case. Shame it's not aliens or spies though. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Postit Notes. In 2015, Reddit user rbradbury1920 posted to Reddit saying that he kept finding Postit Notes in his apartment reminding him to do errands that he had told nobody else about. He was seriously freaked out but found no signs of a break-in. It kept happening though, so he asked Reddit to help him solve it. Reddit user Kakalak made the suggestion that perhaps he was the one leaving the notes and just not remembering. He suggested it could be mental health, but also it could be a carbon monoxide leak. This odorless gas can have serious effects on people's brains and will cause death if levels are high enough. He replied by saying that he was having pretty bad headaches and that he'd set up his carbon monoxide detector right away. It was a good job he did that because that was the problem. The level had reached a dangerous 100 ppm, causing him to black out and forget that he wrote the Post-it notes. Mystery solved, but even more importantly I think, a life saved. Coming in at number 8 now, we have the nail through the wood. One day a Reddit user posted this image to Reddit. That's a nail going through a piece of wood, but how did it get there? As you can see, there is no hole on the piece on the left. How did the nail end up going through the other pieces? The user who posted it said he found it on a hiking trip. He said there was no visual trickery involved and the wood was just one solid block, no glue. Reddit was stumped. Nobody could figure out how it was achieved. And then, on November 21st, 2009, woodworker Steve Ramsey uploaded a video to show the solution. He made the block, soaked the end piece in boiling water, and then used a clamp to push it down enough so that he could nail a hole into the next block. Then he simply soaked it again to make it take its original form. Incredibly simple and very impressive work by him. The video is currently sitting at over 20 million views. Alright, this next one is really freaky and I would hate it if it happened to me. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the SIM card. In 2013, Reddit user ShadyBusiness15 posted pictures to Reddit showing his extension cord which had blown a fuse. Now when he took it apart, he found a SIM card with a serial number on it. What? Yeah, I would freak out too. Reddit users realized there was actually a microphone attached to the device. He was being bugged. Every time someone rang that SIM card's number, it was then listening to the whole room. He called the number on the SIM card and an automated message said, "The service is now closed. If you have voicemail, you can turn it on." He then called O2, the SIM card's manufacturer, who told him that he'd need a warrant to find out who owned that number. Well, the mystery was solved of what exactly the device was. Now they just need to figure out who put it there. Next up at number 6 now, we have Hit and Run. In 2013, Reddit user Meathead posted an image of a broken tail light from a car that had been involved in a hit and run. He wanted to identify who the driver was. Not much to go on, really, with just a tiny bit of a tail light. 400 Reddit comments poured in and eventually they identified the tail light belonged to a grey 1991 Cadillac Brougham. He went to the police with that information and they were able to match it to a stolen vehicle. With this lead, they found the hit and run driver and then laid charges on him or her. I don't know. Maybe Reddit can figure out the gender from the taillight too. Alright, at number 5 now, we have the Cipher. In 2012, a Reddit user posted saying that a homeless man had given him $50 with markings on it and a note covered in some sort of strange code. Redditors quickly identified it as a bifid cipher, a message scrambled using a square grid system. They decoded it to read, "There's plenty more money to make, figure this out, and prepare to meet." Very spooky and cryptic. It also also gave the address of a hot dog stand and told him to go there and ask for Mr. Input. And then he got another message threatening him because he tried to get Reddit to help him. Soon after, the original poster deleted his initial post after claiming he was now getting death threats, and his family were too. The Reddit hunt continued though, and the theories for this now range from recruitment for the Department of Defense to some sort of elaborate marketing campaign for a local spy museum. Some people say this is solved, while others say that's exactly what Mr. Input wants you to think. Next up at number 4 now, we have the Strongsville Jane Doe. In 1975, 3 boys found a skeleton by a river in Ohio. It was identified as belonging to an 18 to 25-year-old woman who had been shot in the head some 5 months before her discovery. Detectives hit a dead end on identifying who she was, and it just became another cold case. Fast forward to 2015, where Reddit user Call Me Ice decided to do some digging on the case herself. She managed to obtain the original autopsy report, including a photo of the woman's skull. She then enlisted the help of a forensic scientist to create this facial reconstruction. A while later, they found this image of a 17-year-old Linda Pagano who went missing in September 1974 after an argument with her stepfather. They contacted the medical examiner's office, who say they were already working on that exact match. Shortly after, Linda's sister confirmed that the skeleton did belong to Linda. The Reddit community praised user Call Me Ice for her incredible initiative and detective work. Moving on to number 3 now, we have Stonehenge. In 2011, Reddit users noticed that someone had created a strange subreddit with a long string of numbers and letters and was just dumping weird code into it. Thousands of Redditors tried to figure out what this code all meant. Eventually, one Reddit user called Fraglet decided to put his programming skills to good use. He decoded one of the posts to reveal it was actually a picture of Stonehenge drawn in ASC2 art. Other posts were decoded to read things like Happy New Year 2001 and also what looked like coordinates in North Korea. Eventually, the whole subreddit was just closed. Most of the code was never even decoded. On the one hand, it was a victory to even uncode just some of it, but many users still want to figure out what the whole thing was about. Coming in at number 2 now, we have Grateful Doe. In 1995, a hitchhiker was killed in a car accident in Virginia. Because of his injuries, police were unable to identify who he was. They found a note on his body referring to him as Jason from 2 women called Caroline T and Caroline O. The police were completely lost on this one. Almost 20 years went by and nobody had solved the mystery. Then, in 2014, Reddit user Zombie Gray, real name Layla Betts, began to research the cold case herself. A whole community sprung up on Reddit to help her. She posted digitally recreated pictures of the hitchhiker. Then she was contacted by a man who said the images looked a lot like his roommate Jason Callahan, who he hadn't seen since 1995. That's when they realized they were onto something. Incredibly, Jason's mother saw these pictures online at the same time. They were able to contact the Virginia Medical Examiner's Office to do a DNA comparison between the hitchhiker and Jason's mother. Sure enough, it was a match. Layla Betts, with the help of the larger Reddit community, had solved a 20-year-old cold case and brought closure to Jason's family. And finally at number 1 now, we have the box of crazy. In 2013, Reddit user TramStopDan posted images of a box that he found in the trash. What he found inside was this weird collection of posters, illustrations, maps, and personal belongings. Some of the text and pictures made references to alien invasions and trains with animal faces. The pages were so intricately detailed. This was obviously done by someone who took the work very seriously. Eventually, Reddit's investigation led them to a man named Daniel Christensen, a Danish immigrant to the US who has since died. They found out that Daniel had become obsessed with the book of Ezekiel from the Bible. Couple that with his apparent schizophrenia, and the book appears to be his belief in the Bible as proof of aliens visiting Earth. The case was then closed as solved. However, for the people who said this was a government cover-up the whole time, this only added fuel to the fire. What do you guys think of this one?
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Operation Northwoods. This is an operation that comes from the time of the Cold War, and it has to do with the tense relationship that was seen between the United States and Cuba at the time. Operation Northwoods, should it have gone forward, would have been a project that saw violence committed against US and Cuban civilians with the blame placed on the Cuban government. Messed up, right? These acts would include fake attacks of high magnitude, the hijacking of planes, the sinking of boats, like some really serious stuff. Basically, they just wanted to harm themselves just to place the blame on Cuba, and they wanted to do this in order to justify an all-out war with Cuba, but thankfully some people at the time had decided that this likely wasn't the smartest or the best route to take, and the idea was scrapped. For a long time this was hidden from the public until years later documents were revealed that showed this very dark truth. In our number 9 spot today we have Operation Cottage. This operation was a tactical maneuver which completed the Aleutian Islands campaign in World War II, and it was a joint services assault on the island of Kiska. On August 15, 1943, Allied military forces landed on the island with the aim to eliminate the Imperial Japanese forces that had occupied the island since June 1942. Unbeknownst to the Allied forces, however, the Japanese forces had secretly abandoned the island 2 weeks earlier under the cover of thick fog using submarines and ships. So basically what I'm saying is that when the Allied forces landed here, they were unopposed. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that no one lost their lives. There were around 313 casualties, which were a result of stray Japanese landmines, vehicle accidents, and a series of friendly fire incidents. Most of the friendly fire incidents were between Canadian and American troops as they mistook each other for Japanese forces as they came from opposite sides of the island. In our number 8 spot today we have rabbit telepathy. This is an experiment that was originally conducted after World War II but wasn't brought to light until many years later, well into the 2000s. Said to have been a part of, quote, Soviet and Czechoslovakian parapsychology research that was done from the end of World War II through to the Cold War era, this is one of the most grisly and truly unbelievable experiments that were conducted. Basically, they were trying to use rabbits to communicate with submarines, which is just already a bizarre kind of concept on a regular level, but of course the way in which they conducted this experiment was wrong and inhumane and truly just very cruel. Just a little heads up, if you're sensitive to animal stuff, I would maybe just skip over this one. You know, I wanna be safe, okay? So for the test, they would take a mother rabbit who had recently just had bunnies. They would keep the mother in a lab on shore, and then they would take the bunnies down with them in the submarine. Slowly, one by one, they would take the life of the bunnies, and each time they did, the mother rabbit's brain would produce a detectable and recordable reaction. Is this one of the worst things I've ever heard? Yes. What's even worse is that the report then goes on to say that other examples of, quote, animal telepathy research continued into the 1970s, and that it included other animals such as dogs, bears, birds, insects, and fish. I can't imagine they were, but let's just hope that these other tests weren't quite so cruel and inhumane. In our number 7 spot today we have Operation LAC. Operation LAC, which is short for Large Area Coverage, was a Cold War era project that involved the US Army Chemical Corps. Basically, it was a test that was designed to see whether or not it would be possible or feasible to taint a large area by dropping chemical agents from planes. To test this idea, they dropped, quote, a myriad of microscopic particles from planes covering an area that is said to span from the Rockies to the Atlantic, from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. So yes, definitely a large area indeed. In fact, it was so large that this is actually the largest test that the Chemical Corps had ever undertaken. According to the declassified documents relating to this operation, the tests, quote, did not provide the Corps with nearly as much data as the Corps would like. And then it goes on to say that, quote, to obtain additional data, the Corps planned further tests for the next fiscal year. Okay, well that's a little daunting. While not necessarily the same operation, also in the Cold War era was a similar test conducted that targeted a neighborhood in St. Louis, Missouri. This test saw the area being sprayed with zinc cadmium sulfide. At the time, those local to the area were being told that, quote, the government was testing a smoke screen that could shield St. Louis from aerial observation in case the Russians attacked. But of course, decades later, documents revealed that the tests were actually a part of a biological weapons program. And to make matters even worse, the zinc cadmium sulfide was linked to an increase in cancer among the residents of the neighborhood. In our number 6 spot today we have the embassy missions. This is a secret that was hidden not only from the American people, but also the people that were being spied on and listened to, but it wasn't revealed until 2007 2011 when a document was leaked. This document is one that named 38 different embassies and missions that were so-called targets of US surveillance. The document didn't quite make it clear whether or not these targets were being looked into by only the NSA or if the CIA and FBI were also involved. The document described certain things like bugging fax machines with devices that allowed them to listen in on conversations, and the document also listed the names of different programs that are used within the embassies. The document showed that the embassies targeted weren't just those of countries who seemed to be enemies with the United States, and instead included places like India and Mexico, Greece, and Turkey. It appears as if the goal was to gain insider information into the diplomatic relations between the targets and the United States. The EU embassy in Washington, D.C. was one of the targets on this document, and this leak had the potential to have jeopardized one of the largest attempted free trade agreements in the world, because shortly after this all came out, negotiations were set to begin between the EU and the United States. The French president at the time made his anger about the situation very public and stated that all future negotiations will only be made under the agreement that the United States cease all unauthorized surveillance of any EU buildings or personnel. In our number 5 spot today, we have Operation Fast and Furious. No, this isn't another installment of the beloved franchise, although family is everything. This actually was a tactic that was used by the Arizona U.S. Attorney's Office and the Arizona Field Office of the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, as they were conducting a series of sting operations from 2006 to 2011. Basically, the idea for this operation was to allow licensed firearm dealers to sell weapons to illegal buyers, hoping to track the firearms down later to Mexican drug cartel leaders so that they could then arrest them. So not only did this not lead to the results that they were hoping for, but it actually had terrible outcomes. Many of the firearms that were being tracked have been found at crime scenes on both sides of the United States-Mexico border, and one was even found at the scene where United States Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was killed. In our number 4 spot today, we have Operation Starfish Prime. This is an operation that took place in 1962, and it was a joint one between the US Atomic Energy Commission and the Defense Atomic Support Agency. Basically, they detonated a thermonuclear device in the sky above the Pacific Ocean. They launched it from the Johnson Atoll using a Thor rocket, and once at an altitude of about 240 miles, they set it off, which ended up producing a yield of about 1.4 megatons. The electromagnetic pulse was so powerful and widespread that it disabled not only most of the equipment that was set up to measure it, but it also took out streetlights and caused telephone outages in Hawaii, nearly 900 miles away. The electrons released caused an aura that could be seen over most of the Pacific Ocean, and according to the documents, the quote visible phenomena due to the burst were widespread and quite intense, and apparently it was visible for days. In the end, it is said that the researchers weren't expecting such a powerful blast of electromagnetic pulse, and they were also anticipating that the electrons from the blast would get stuck in the Earth's own magnetic field for months, possibly even years, but alas, they did. This went on to create a radiation belt around the planet that eventually went on to disable at least 6 satellites, which included the world's first commercial satellite, only a few months after it was launched. The government didn't even tell AT&T what had happened until 2005. In our number 3 spot today, we have Acoustic Kitty. Apparently, in 1967, the CIA was spending millions of dollars trying to make cats into spies. I don't know why they chose the one animal that does not care what you want it to do, but they did, and Project Acoustic Kitty was born. The project basically involved implanting electronic spy equipment into real living cats who would then be trained to basically eavesdrop on unsuspecting people. This Cold War era plan was intended to be used on those in the Soviet Union. The project had a whole slew of issues, of course, because cats can get hungry and distracted, and unfortunately the first time this plan was being tested, there was a catastrophic outcome. The project, of course, was cancelled, and the researchers said that they believed they could train cats to move short distances, but that, quote, the environmental and security factors in using this technique in a real foreign situation forces us to conclude that for our intelligence purposes, it would not be practical. In our number 2 spot today, we have the cat drop. Not really sure why the government is obsessed with cats, but here we go. Apparently, the United States Office of Strategic Services, once upon a time, decided that the very best and most sensible way to ensure that bombs that had been dropped reached their intended naval targets was to strap them to cats and then drop them from planes. I know, absolutely horrific, definitely not my plan. They thought up this strange project because for some reason they thought that the cats would just be able to avoid the water and instead direct themselves to the target. Strange in theory, catastrophic in reality. There of course is no way to prevent these animals from fainting midair, and if you were dropped from a plane suddenly with no parachute and a bomb strapped to you, you'd probably also faint, because what in the actual hell? Definitely one for the history books. We can all be thankful that this is not something that carried on for long. In our number 1 spot today we have Unit 731. The Imperial Japanese Army's Unit 731 conducted some pretty horrifying experiments during World War II that certainly are shocking to anyone who learns about them. The experiments were meant to be done as a way to prepare for biological warfare, but the process was gruesome and extremely inhumane. Different medical schools and universities provided doctors and other research staff to help conduct these experiments, and they used both prisoners and civilians as the guinea pigs for them. There were a bunch of different experiments that were conducted during this time, some of which involved injecting them with pathogens such as plague or cholera or anthrax. Others involved vivisection or operations with no anesthesia, putting them in a pressure chamber to see how much a human can withstand before bursting, or live weapons testing. It is hard to even believe that this is a real thing that happened, and we honestly can't even begin to imagine what those people were forced to face during that time. After World War II, however, the United States gave immunity to Shiro Ishii, who is the Japanese Army medical officer responsible for lethal human experimentation and biological warfare projects. Many of these experiments he conducted just to see what would happen. Why not? American scientists decided that this information would be valuable, so they decided to give him immunity in exchange for the information on chemical and biological warfare. Shiro was never tried for his crimes.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Spies. Tons of people are afraid that the government is spying on them. It's thought that they can tap into our phones and watch us and listen to our calls, even though I don't know why they would want to. Like, what are they gonna see me scrolling through like Instagram all day? It's not a pretty sight. Now, we can't really prove that they do, but recently a post on Reddit revealed that they are tracking us. So I don't know if this is a thing outside of Canada, but it is in Canada. So Apple and Android phones now have a COVID-19 sensor on them. Basically, this allows the government to track your every move. A couple of weeks ago, a lot of cell phone users were having phone disruptions, and that's apparently when the tracker was put on the phones. In secret. But it's not on all phones. Once you update your phone, then it's automatically turned on. Don't believe me? Well, the post says that for iPhone users, go to Settings, Privacy, Health, and then you'll see it, but it's not yet functional. For Android users, go to Settings, then Google Settings, and it should be there. This is said to be able to notify you if you've been near someone that has the virus. But it's also a way for the government to track your every move. Seriously, why would they have this feature and then just like not tell us about it? Why is everything done in secrecy? They're up to something. Moving on at number 9, we have Nixons Health. Now, this isn't really classified information, but I thought it was quite interesting, and it was brought to my attention by Kelly, Roy on Reddit. So the files of Richard Nixon's longtime physician, Dr. Walter Tkach, probably said that last name wrong, are on lockdown. The doctor's son has the files and is planning to eventually release them to the Nixon library, but when he does, they will not be open for 75 years. Not only that, but taped conversations between Nixon and his doctor are also on lockdown, and they will not be released. Now, why is this significant? Well, some people believe that Nixon was incapacitated towards the end of his presidency. If so, then under the 25th Amendment, he should have had his authority suspended. So there's a reason why the government has been keeping these files classified. It's going to apparently expose a lot. In our 8th spot, we have the trade documents. Back in 2019, the Reddit account OsterMaxNN leaked a bunch of UK government trade documents. The documents discussed future trade deals between the US and the UK. They also revealed plans by the Conservative Party to privatize National Health Service. After investigation, it turns out that the Reddit user that leaked the documents was part of a larger coordinated effort effort from Russia. Reddit said, and I quote, "We investigated this account and the accounts connected to it. And today we believe this was part of a campaign that has been reported as originating from Russia." In our 7th spot, we have Area 51. Everyone wants to know what really goes on in Area 51. Is it really where they're keeping aliens? I need to know. But sadly, we don't truly know. But we do have some insider information on what it's like in Area 51. Yeah, you heard me. 8 years ago, a Reddit user by the name of Kiver16 revealed that his mother's boyfriend is Steven Gorvan, aka one of the people who was at Area 51 testing the Mars rover. He uploaded a picture of Steven holding a sign saying, "Hi Reddit, ask me anything," as proof that it actually was him and he wasn't just gonna make it up. So people quickly jumped to it, asking him tons of questions on the mysterious base. During one part of the Q&A, Steven revealed that when he first arrived at the base, he saw a strange aircraft flying low across the desert floor. He believed that it was a test flight for a secret aircraft. He said it moved at subsonic speed and didn't make a lot of noise. He also revealed that Area 51 is much bigger than it looks, with tons of different sectors and buildings. Now sadly, he didn't see any aliens. But he did reveal that it seemed like we are close to hoverboard technology, like the ones you see in Back to the Future, so that's pretty cool. Moving on to number 6, we have D.B. Cooper. One of the most famous and mysterious cases of all times, and I might have found out what happened to him. But first, let me give a rundown on this dude for the people who have no clue what I'm talking about. Dan Cooper, or D.B. Cooper, is a man who was responsible for a plane hijacking in 1971. No one knows who he is or where he is now. So in 1971, Cooper boarded the plane, and once in the air, he handed the flight attendant a note saying that he had a bomb in his suitcase. He demanded $200,000 and a parachute, but he didn't want any hostages. So they landed in Seattle, he got his requests, and then he told the pilot to fly to Mexico City. However, along the way, he took the money and his parachute and jumped out of the plane. The police looked for Cooper until 2016, and this case is known as one of the longest active searches in history. Now, 2 years ago, a former FBI special agent joined Reddit and did a AMA, Ask Me Anything. To prove it was really him, he held a piece of paper like the other dude, saying his name and his Reddit, blah blah blah. The man is Mark Ruskin, who worked 20 years in undercover operations. One of the questions that someone asked him was about D.B. Cooper, and what the FBI thought happened to him and what he thought happened to him. Ready for this? Both the FBI and Mark believe that D.B. Cooper did not survive the parachute down. I know, so anticlimactic, but apparently they have evidence to suggest he didn't make it. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the cat bomb. So this secret isn't really a secret anymore. I guess most of these aren't secrets anymore, but I didn't know this was a thing until I read about it on Reddit, meaning that I bet some of you haven't heard about it either. So during World War II, the government thought it would be a good idea to strap a cat to a bomb. They thought that by doing so, it would assure the bombs would reach their target. Cats hate water, so they thought if you drop a cat strapped to a bomb over water, the cat would avoid the water and then would just land on the battleship's deck. But obviously, for many reasons, that did not work out. Cats would end up passing out midair before sinking without a trace. They also tried something similar with bats, which again, didn't really work. Moving on to number 4, we have the bomb shelter. This is going to come to a shock to anyone who lives outside of the US. Posted on Reddit by the user Deadpool8988, they said that at one point, the US government was telling people to build a bomb shelter in their backyards. They instructed people to dig a big enough hole in their backyard and then cover it with a door. They were told to hide out there in case of a nuclear attack. But turns out that the real reason why they were telling families to do this was so that if there was a nuclear attack, the government wouldn't have to bury as many bodies. So families were literally digging their own graves. That is extremely disturbing. In our third spot, we have the blood supply. Okay, this one is going to be pretty crazy. So back in 1984, the Red Cross Society in Canada was importing blood products from the US. This was at the time of the AIDS crisis, and America was hit much harder with it. There was fear that the disease was going to be transmitted through this blood. But the Red Cross ignored it, and according to this Reddit user who was a lab worker for the American Red Cross, apparently they were aware of this and so was the US government. But they didn't warn Canadians. Instead, they told them they had nothing to worry about and that they tested the blood before sending it. The guy was forced to keep his mouth shut and lie. As a result, tons of hemophiliacs who had blood transfusions later died of AIDS. What's freaky is that the Reddit user that shared this information later deleted his account. I just hope that he's safe and that the government didn't come for him for exposing them. In our second spot, we have the leaked emails. In March 2016, the personal Gmail account of John Podesta, a former White House chief of staff and chair of Hillary Clinton's 2016 US presidential campaign, was hacked, and his emails revealed some very disturbing things. So the emails were posted to Reddit along with other websites, and then users started to decipher them. They believe that Hillary and other people of power are part of a human and a sex ring. In the emails, they use code words like pizza, cheese pizza, and hot dogs. Kinda weird, and it would say things like, and I quote, "I'm dreaming about your hot dog stand in Hawaii." Clearly, there's a hidden message to that. I can't dive into too much detail about it for obvious reasons, but you should do some research of your own. It's crazy. What makes this more suspicious is that the government removed all posts about this from Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, and other social media sites. Any posts about the emails and the theories will be removed. And in our number one spot, we have the blue van. Okay, this one thoroughly creeps me out. Like, it just proves that the government is up to no good. So this story was posted on Reddit by a former homicide detective. One time he was called to a scene where the victim had called 911 saying that someone was trying to kill him. He told police that he was hiding in his panic room. When they arrived at his house, there were no signs of forced entry, and all the doors remained locked from the inside. Inside the house, there was no damage, it was just super clean, no signs of violence or anything. Due to this, the detective believed that the attacker was someone that the man knew and invited inside. When they eventually got to the panic room, they found the man sitting on the floor. His face had a terrified expression plastered on it. Both of his arms were missing, not cut off. They looked as if they had been ripped off. His missing limbs were never found. Now, here's where it gets spooky. As soon as they reported their findings, the police captain told the team to give all of the evidence, along with the victim's body, to the individuals in a blue van that had arrived on the scene. The blue van belonged to the government. After they did this, the case was buried. They never heard any more information on it. Like, what? Seems like some government creature got released and killed this guy or something like that, and then they're trying to cover it up.